In the beginning, there was no land, only a vast, endless ocean. Above it was the sky world, where the spirits lived in harmony. One day, Sky Woman fell from a hole in the sky. She carried with her a handful of seeds, symbols of new life. As she descended, the animals in the water saw her falling and grew worried. She needed a place to land or she would be lost. The birds flew up and gently caught her, keeping her afloat. But water alone could not hold her. She needed land. Then, Turtle emerged from the deep and spoke, "Let her rest on my back." And Turtle offered himself as the foundation. The animals dove into the depths of the sea, trying to bring up earth. One by one, they tried and failed, until the muskrat, small and quiet, dove deep. He returned with mud clutched in his paws, though he lost his breath in the process. Sky Woman placed the mud on Turtle's back. She planted the seeds, and she sang a song of creation. The land began to grow. Mountains rose, forests stretched wide, rivers began to flow. The land became Turtle Island, the sacred place where life began anew. And now for Genesis 1:9, verse 13. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning the third day.
Will you pray with me? Come, Spirit, come. Fall fresh upon us as we hear these ancient stories and listen for their call into our times. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, friends, today we continue on with our season of creation by again turning to our natural world for our spiritual lessons and meditations. And today, we turn to earth for that lesson. Now, many of you who have grown up here in the Pacific Northwest or who have been out here for a long time know exactly where you were on May 18th, 1980. When Mount St. Helens erupted. Now, I was a kid in Michigan, and even there, I remember that day. That eruption was one of the most destructive volcanic events in United States history. The lateral blast and the subsequent flows of ash and earth devastated over 230 square miles of forests, leveling trees and infrastructures in their path. The immense energy released during the eruption generated a towering ash plume that ascended thousands of feet into the atmosphere. And the ecosystem in the surrounding area was destroyed. Now, about 4 years ago, Jasper and I took a camping and hiking trip down to Mount St. Helens. It was my first time visiting the area. And seeing the blast zone and the crater up close some 45 years later was jaw-dropping. But what was even more amazing was witnessing all of the signs of recovery. Now, on that trip, we learned that the story of Mount St. Helens is not only one of destruction, but it is also one of renewal, rejuvenation, and resilience. We learned that Mount St. Helens is also a story of healing and transformation. Now, currently, down at Mount St. Helens, lush forests have reclaimed much of the once barren landscape, showing off how the earth has been able to rebound and thrive. Now, that slide is from NASA satellite imagery, and it shows the forest recovery from immediately on the left, right after the eruption, to 35 years later. And this slide is from NASA, and it shows the most current forest recovery. And a whole lot of species have returned or have adapted to the changed ecosystems in the blast zone and are demonstrating a resurgence of life. Now, as we hiked, we witnessed this powerful testament to the resilience of Earth and the intricate balance of nature's processes. And we got to see the mountain's recovery up close. We got to give witness to renewal and healing and transformation in the witness of a catastrophic event. We got to give witness to new creation. And it left us in a state of awe and reverence. Now, that recovery that we witnessed was 4 decades post-eruption. It did not happen overnight. The original destruction was devastating. And you can still witness the scars of that devastation as you look into the crater. But the wounds caused by that massive eruption also revealed something deeply profound about the earth. The earth did not ask permission to heal. It simply did. The earth did not ask permission to adapt. It simply did. Even after the most devastating of natural events, the earth found a way to restore and heal. The earth found a way to continue the cycle of life. New life sprang from the mineral-rich ash. Small at first, pioneer species prepared fertile volcanic soil for other plants, and eventually thriving forests and fields grew. Where once there was only destruction, something new emerged. Now, the mountain and the surrounding areas down at Mount St. Helens are different from what they were before the eruption. But in many ways, I think it is actually kind of more beautiful than it was before the eruption. Why? Because the scars that the earth carries at Mount St. Helens are a reminder of its strength, an indication of its resiliency. Those scars are a witness to the earth's ability to heal and to adapt to radical change and to transform into new creation. So the spiritual lessons that the earth offers to us from the example of the devastating eruption and subsequent recovery at Mount St. Helens are plentiful. So, what can the earth teach us from that blast zone? Well, none of us are exempt from the eruptions in our own lives, from tragedies or heartaches. Eventually, our lives will all be touched by these things. Sorrow comes into all of our lives, and we all experience devastation, as well as disappointments, letdowns, and heartaches. We will all experience those times when the earth itself seems to shift between our feet, and everything changes. We will all experience our own eruptions and subsequent destruction and devastation in the blast zone. Many of us already have. Some of us are in the middle of ongoing violent eruptions right now. But if we look to the story of Mount St. Helens, we can probably find some spiritual lessons about managing those volcanic blasts, the really hard things in our own lives. And we can start by recognizing there is nothing easy, there was nothing painless about the eruption at Mount St. Helens. It was shocking, it was devastating, it was destructive. That eruption was an enormous wound upon the earth, and it is taking time for the recovery of those wounds. It is not happening overnight. Healing and transformation cannot be rushed. Years ago, I came across this saying, and it goes like this: God is in the wound, God heals the wound, God transforms the wound. And it's a saying that I draw deep comfort from and meaning from. And I have found truth in those words in so many of my own sacred stories of wounding, recovery, and transformation. God is in the wound, God heals the wound, God transforms the wound. So if we look to Mount St. Helens' wounds and devastation of that initial eruption, we can recognize God did not create the wound. That destruction did not have a purpose. And similarly, in our own lives, our own eruptions and hard times are not created by God. Full stop. They do not have purpose. Full stop. Bad things happen. And they often happen to particularly good people. And there is no simple answer for why those things happen. Now, that being said, I can look at my own life and recognize that when I have experienced the unthinkable and known deep sorrow and pain, known the biggest of wounds, that something always emerged out of that painful time. Something that was wholly unanticipated and radically beautiful. And when I look at those images of Mount St. Helens, I can see something wholly unanticipated and radically beautiful emerging out of those wounds. That does not mean that wounds and the sufferings they cause have purpose. It just means that sometimes it is possible to discover or uncover purpose or meaning in the suffering caused by the wounds. What I can also see from the healing and transformation at Mount St. Helens and from my own life is that God promises in the face of great wounds is presence. God is present with us in all wounds. We are not alone. From the wounds caused by the volcanic eruptions in our lives, the bad things happening, God responds and says, I am here, I am here, I am here. When we face those eruptions in our lives, we have to believe in that presence. We have to believe in that presence in such a way that we can never step outside of it, no matter what is facing us. We have to rest in that presence. We have to abide in that presence. And we have to let that presence renew our souls. From the wound, God responds and says, I am here, I am here, I am here. And not just in the moment of wounding, but also in the healing and the transformation of the wound. God is present. And again, God doesn't cause bad situation, but instead God is working within those eruptions, those hard times, those subsequent wounds, leading us towards healing and transformation, albeit often in a way that is wholly unanticipated and often not what we may have thought we wanted or needed. But God is in the wound, healing and transforming the wound. Out of pain and sorrow, something new is born. Something new emerges. And just like at Mount St. Helens, we are not the same after the eruptions. Life is not the same after the hard times. Transformation often never looks like what we imagined or what we assumed or what we often hoped for. But just like at Mount St. Helens, we are often in many ways so much more beautiful than we were before the eruptions in our lives, before the devastation. The scars at Mount St. Helens and the ones that we carry are a reminder of strength and resilience and a witness to the presence of God and God's call to transformation, but always transformation on God's terms. The storms will come. The volcanoes will erupt. The earth teaches us that even in the darkest of those times, life finds a way to push through, to grow, to transform, to rise again forever changed. The earth teaches us that even in the face of great loss, there is always the possibility of renewal, of healing, and of hope. So thanks be to the earth, and thanks be to God. Amen.